Mr. Radonovich, I understand you have some amendments in block you wish to offer. I want to recognize you at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have 3 amendments, excuse me, at the desk labeled Shadegg 71BC and D, and I would ask unanimous consent that the all 3 amendments be considered as read.
Without objection, these 3 amendments will be considered as read, and we'll now proceed to yield the gentleman 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Talk on this amendment.
I appreciate that. Mr. Chairman, in my time in Congress, I've admired many states who seem to come together and unify over various issues. And you know, as in California, we have 53 members. It's a diverse state. I love the state, but sometimes it's hard to come together on things. And I asked a friend from another state, I said, how do you do it? How do you come together? And he said, we use California as an example of how not to be. And the reason why I mentioned that, it's in that spirit that I offer these 3 amendments, because they speak to different efficiency mandates that were lifted from the California Efficiency Standard Code as it relates to electric spas, mandates for water dispensers, and mandates for food holding cabinets. And the amendments that I offer would strike the efficiency standards and the mandates for all 3 of these items. I do have a question of counsel. If I may, I'd like to ask how many spas would currently meet this requirement or would be affected by this requirement. Can you tell me? In the United States?
I don't have that information.
And thank you, counsel. I appreciate that. But if you don't have the information, then why are we implementing the standard? Wouldn't it be wise before we implemented a standard like this that we'd know, you know, the impact on CO2 output?
I do have information of calculation of how much energy and CO2 output would be saved.
On spas and water dispensers and food holding cabinets?
Yes. This is an estimate that was created by the I believe by the industries involved and by the American Council for an Energy Efficient Economy, so that it's not a committee number, but there is information in the record.
It's and I'm sorry, who were the ones that provided the information? Was it
the manufacturers involved, apparently, and the American Council for an Energy Efficient Economy.
And who's the American Council for Energy Efficiency Economy?
That's a nonprofit energy efficiency group that was one of the groups that was involved in negotiating and agreeing to the consensus standards that are in this section, along with the manufacturers who make these products.
Do you know who they're funded by, or have any idea who that group is funded by? Headed up by? Or headed up by?
I don't know their funding sources.
The reason why I'm offering these amendments, Mr. Chairman, is that again, California is not the state to be modeling yourself after. As you know, yesterday there have been some budget initiatives that have failed, and the state is now $42 billion in debt. And I think it's in a large part because California has become a nanny state, in that they're trying to do too many things to too many people, and the state global warming bill is trying to do too many things for everybody on the planet just by itself. And the result has been large increase in cost to consumers and businesses in California. For the first time, we've got more people leaving California than are entering California, and we've got more business leaving California because of the unfavorable business climate. These are examples, and nitpicking small examples of why things are so tough in California and why an onerous global warming initiative, if you apply nationally what's been done in California, you're going to experience the same problems we are in balancing the budget and running out of money. And so it's in that spirit that I offer these 3 amendments. And yes.
Gentleman, yield back.
I yield to the gentleman from Arizona.
Okay.
I thank the gentleman for yielding. I rise in support of the amendments, but I would like to ask counsel, There is a similar provision in the bill that sets standards for art lighting, that is, lighting placed on art objects in residences. Do you have an estimate of how much energy is consumed? I believe you just disclosed you do have for some. Do you happen to have one for art lighting consumed in residences?
The table that I have has an estimate for the portable lighting consensus agreement, within which the art lighting part is a part, but I don't have a separate estimate for
Did you
art
say
lighting.
portable lighting?
Portable lighting.
Yeah, well, I'm not interested in portable lighting. I assume art lighting is fixed to the art object or to shine on the art object. But you're saying art lighting is within that category?
If you can move the art object, I guess you move the light as well.
Reclaim.
Thank you.
Gentleman's
Claiming the
time
time
is-
I don't have. I yield back.
Gentleman's time has expired. The chair recognizes himself. These sections enact that new standards for a variety of appliances, including outdoor lights, which will save immense amounts of energy. There are also several crucial improvements to the appliance standard setting process that will enhance the process. Appliance standards are one of the most effective energy efficiency policies. The standards already on the books will save over $400 billion by 2030, according to the American Council for an Energy Efficient Economy. The new standards in the bill will cut emissions by almost 12 million metric tons of carbon dioxide per year by 2020. In the absence of federal standards, states can set their own efficiency requirements. Consensus agreements like those not only ensure significant energy savings, but also provide certainty for manufacturers who sell appliances throughout the country. Industry wants us to put these standards in place. I have a letter from the Association of Pool and Spa Professionals giving their support to our bill. They say, quote, having a uniform national standard is easier for our members to implement than having a patchwork in which some states have standards and some do not, end quote. So these standards may make a great joke for some people, but real businesses, people who make their livelihoods out of this business, want their products to be energy efficient. So I would hope that we would not accept these en bloc amendments, and without objection, the letter that I referred to will be made part of the record.
And will the chairman yield for
I'd be happy to yield.
Mr. Chairman, I thank you for yielding to me, and I've been informed that the manufacturers want it because it increases the cost of their machines to the caterer on the street who's trying to make a living, and to the people that are providing water coolers for their employees. It just increases costs to the consumer and to the little guy, and that's why I think these mandates ought to be lifted.
I think reclaiming my time, I think the little guy likes to know that when you buy an appliance or use any kind of appliance and efficiency standards are in place, that they're reducing their carbon footprint. They're going to be much more efficient in their use of energy. It could well save them money as a result, and they can't make appliances more efficient. The manufacturers are the ones who make appliances more efficient. I think that we've seen when we've had efficiency standards in place that the costs are not exorbitant at all, and the results are a major plus. So rather than have a patchwork of state standards, I think the national standards make sense. You may want to doubt you may just want to attack industry and say they're trying to make more money out of it, but the Association of Pool and Spa Professionals do believe that the provisions of the bill make a lot of sense, and I think that it says they've been committed to making pools, spas, and hot tubs more energy efficient. I'd like to help them accomplish that goal and not strike out the provisions. I have some time remaining. If the gentleman from Connecticut wishes, I'd be glad to yield to him.
If the chairman would just yield for a moment with respect to the issue of cost, I think the exact opposite happens here. You have state standards right now that create a very unlevel playing field for these manufacturers. And one of the reasons why they, as I understand it, came to the table here and asked for a national standard was because they have a lot of costs built in right now, potentially creating different products for different markets and different standards set state by state. So by creating a uniform standard, frankly, you have the ability to have a double win for consumers, to have both a product which is going to cost them less money in energy usage, but also a product that could cost less because these manufacturers don't have to produce ultimately 50 different products for 50 different state standards. They can produce one product. So I think to the gentleman's concern about cost, the result of this could be a much lower cost for consumers.
If the gentleman,
Very good point. Who wishes to be recognized?
Can I be recognized?
Well, let's go to Mr. Terry, and he can yield you some time, Mr. Radonovich.
Glad to
If
yield.
not, I'll recognize you.
Appreciate it. Move to strike the last word. It was interesting in discussion with council, and perhaps it should be vetted out a little bit more, but that the lighting section, and I don't disagree with Mr. Waxman, Chairman Waxman, that I think there will be some efficiencies through this new federal mandate, but that a outside organization, a consumer group, is the one that provided the information and wrote this section. And I'm just curious to how many other outside groups and environmental groups wrote other parts of this bill. For example, there's been a suspicion that an outside group, the NRDC, helped write, if not most, all of the next section we're going to discuss, and I was just curious about that, Council.
Yeah. The gentleman yield before council answers to this?
Yes.
Because I just want to make sure you characterize council's answer earlier was just asking where the statistics that were quoted came from. I don't believe
And that
it's
they
fair.
were provided by an consumer group.
Well, actually, no. The answer was an organization that also includes members of the industry, but they did not. The answer was not that they wrote the section of the bill.
And I will yield back. I will reclaim and yield back to you, Mr. Weiner, that how much of this bill was written by the NRDC, and who was in the room when it was written.
Yeah.
All right. Seeing that you won't answer, I'll yield to Mr. Booyer.
Point of order, Mr. Chairman.
Who's raising a point of order? Please state the point of order.
Mr. Chairman, point of order. I think it's appropriate for council to lend expertise on the bill, but to be a foil for political questions, I think should be directed to the chairman.
Yeah, the chair would
You were the
prefer-
one that was speaking. I yielded
Excuse
to
me.
you, not the council.
chair would
You
prefer to be the
refused to
foil.
answer. I
Chair will-
yielded to Mr. Booyer anyway. Was it Booyer that wanted the time? Radonovich.
take it. No, I think that I would just want to respond that if you want business leaving your state, as it is in California, then continue to think that these
What is ACES?
stringent mandates on manufacturing are actually going to reduce cost to consumers. It's baloney. I mean, use California as an example. Look at what's happening in our state. We're losing jobs.
Wow.
We're losing. We're $42 billion in debt. We're leading the nation and the world in our global warming policy.
Yeah.
Thank God that our carbon footprint is being less. And if
Yeah.
we continue down this path, you'll have a crippled state economy that can't accomplish anything, let alone solve global warming. So if you want business leaving your state, then to continue to think that mandates like this are going to reduce cost to consumers and make everybody happy at no cost, because it just
Yeah.
won't happen. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I guess we have a disagreement. Gentlemen still have
Reclaiming
time.
and yield back.
Yeah.
Yield back. Gentlemen, yield back the time. Ms. Harmon.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm not a nanny, but I am a grandma, and I am proud to be a Californian, as I know you are, Mr. Radonovich.
Yes.
But I think blaming our state's fiscal problems on the cutting-edge green technology programs in California is palpably silly, and I do want the record to show that that's how I feel. I'm also aware of how some of the provisions in this bill did get drafted, at least with respect to outside help, which some of us sought because we may not have all the technical competence to know what a good glide path is, for example, to better outdoor lighting standards. But there was a coalition involving environmental groups, something called the ACEE, which is the it's a Coalition for Energy Efficiency, which is an industry group, and then the affected businesses. And it really was a model process that reflects, I think, how we should develop a consensus on environmentally forward policies that also create standards that industries can meet. And one of the priorities we had, I've been involved in some of this, not the standards for bottled water dispensers, hot food cabinets, and jacuzzis, which are the subject of this amendment, but I have been involved with Mr. Upton in the lighting standards, both indoor and outdoor. I think that we all have tried to achieve something that can lead to increased manufacturing in the United States of the products we're regulating. So this is a win-win. This is a more efficient technology made in the USA that will lower costs, energy costs for consumers. So that is, in answer to your question, what the process was, and I think it was a good process, and the fact that California is inventing cutting-edge standards, which we then adopt nationally, I think is something our state should be proud of. I'd be happy to yield.
I thank the gentlelady from California. We both love our state. We both love the wine that's produced there, and
yes, we do.
And I want to make sure
that
that's apparent. But California is the most expensive place to do business in the United States, and it's a fact that business is leaving California in droves. Now, you know, you may not be able to get away with blaming the global warming initiative in California solely, but it certainly is a part of the expensive business climate. And if you want to increase manufacturing in the United States, then you don't want to copy what's happening in California because business is leaving. If you adopt,
would the gentlelady yield?
No, I won't. If you adopt,
the gentlelady fills the time.
If you adopt what's happening in California, business will leave the United States. Thank you.
Would the
I'd be
gentlelady
happy to yield.
I think we've just heard in consecutive speakers from the Republican side someone who is lamenting the idea that the public interest groups that represent environmental concerns have written too much of the bill. And now the gentleman from California seems to be objecting to your answer that members of industry helped write this section. The fact of the matter is there are enlightened members of the business community who I think understand their own self-interest. And I thought it was generally the Republican ethos to listen when business says this is the things we need. They've asked for these things. This is kind of one-hand clapping. You're standing up for a sector that helped write this section and has expressed their desire to have it. Who are you defending at this point?
Will the gentlelady yield?
I'd be happy to yield.
And I'll try and make this quick. Maybe the best course of action here is for those who are in the room writing the bill to be disclosed so the rest of us know who it was. I mean, that was a huge issue when Dick Cheney had people in the room writing an energy bill. I'm trying to figure out who is in the room writing this bill. Disclosure is a good thing. So
will the gentlelady yield?
On the different segments of the
will the
bill.
gentlelady
Respond to that and then yield.
Yes, I'm also.
I have no problem
I think that's
with
right.
that.
We should find out who in the insurance healthcare lobby wrote the Medicare Part D bill. I've been trying to learn that ever since
All right.
passed.
So disclosure is a good thing.
Absolutely. Let's
find
rock and
out.
roll. I believe it is, and I think the members of this committee have written this bill.
Reclaiming my time.
You can't sidetrack.
But reclaiming
The
my
time
time.
belongs, the time is
Well, Mr. Chairman,
controlled by the lady from
yes,
California.
thank you. And I'd
Gentlelady.
just like to reclaim my time and respond to Mr. Walden. I think I have disclosed, and Mr. Upton has disclosed over the time we've debated these amendments, exactly who was helpful in developing a consensus, a groundbreaking consensus between industry and environmental groups. And I would yield to Mr. Upton just to put on the record who has helped us with lighting.
And I have no objection to that. I think that disclosure
We
is a good
worked with
thing.
many industry groups to get the standards that we adopted in the 07 bill, and again with the outdoor lighting on this one as well. And debated the indoor amendments before this committee at some length, and had strong supporters, including former Speaker Hastert.
And bipartisan support on this committee. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Time has been yielded back. Are we ready for the vote? Gentlelady from Tennessee, Ms. Blackburn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just cannot resist, with all this discussion about disclosure and about making certain that people know who is participating in writing what bill and whose self-interest it is for. Last night, when we had the opportunity to disclose to the American people and the American taxpayer on their electric bills, on their automobiles, at the fuel pump, on their food, what this legislation is costing them, The majority side chose to vote no. So I guess we want everybody to know everything about this except what it is going to cost, and the American taxpayer wants to know what this bill is going to cost. And with that, I yield back.
No, I want some time.
I reclaim my time and yield to Mr. Walden.
Well, I thank you, and
Let's hear about the forests.
I'm No, that's Walden.
I may reclaim my time on that. Yield to the gentleman.
Yeah. Greg wants to insert woody biomass into this discussion, and I just wanted to. Sorry. I wanted to expand on the gentleman from New York City's comments. I do think there's times when you need the input from industry. The council had stated that they were provided the information. I think all of us need to consult with people, but it was Mr. Weiner and others that had characterized any consultations that may have occurred with the bill that he referenced, and then exaggerated it to that they wrote it. So I think it's appropriate, especially under these circumstances, because frankly, there has been signs that the National Defense Resource Council was in fact the author of the next title that we're going to get into. In fact, I know of one instance where someone was sent to the National Defense Resources Council to talk about a change to Title III, not to staff. Now, maybe they were just seeing if the NRDC would talk to the chairman about changes, but there's certainly been a buzz about that. So I think it's a fair question, and I yield back my time to the gentlelady from Tennessee.
The gentlelady yield.
Who's seeking to claim time? I yield to Mr. Booyer.
For the purpose of open disclosure, there were 5 of us that created the Medicare drug discount card program and also created the health savings accounts. 3 of us are sitting here in the room right now. John Shadegg, Joe Barton, and myself are the only 3 remaining out of the 5. It was a very lonely moment when we put that together, because it was just the 5 of us and it was our staff. We wouldn't get any help. I'd say to the gentleman from New York who was so inquisitive, we didn't get any help from anyone from the outside. And so, you know, when you write.
Gentlemen would permit, are you going off track on the amendment that's before us?
I'm responding to an allegation. Actually, I'm responding to an inquiry from the gentleman from New York that for years he's never known who was in the room. I just want him to know that there are 3 of us that were here, that when we put together the drug discount card program and created health savings accounts, we did it ourselves.
Is this a disclosure or a confession?
Well, I will accept responsibility because it's been a good program to the benefit of seniors. I yield back to the gentlelady.
Are we, the gentlelady still has a minute. Are you willing to yield it back?
Mr. Chairman, I am grateful for the time, and I will yield back the remainder of my time.
Thank the gentlelady. Are we ready to go forward and vote on this? Then let's proceed to a vote. Do you want to have a roll call vote? The clerk will call the roll. Those in favor of the Radonovich amendments in block say aye. Those opposed will vote no.
Mr. Waxman?
No.
Mr. Waxman? No. Mr. Dingell? Mr. Markey? Mr. Markey? No. Mr. Boucher? Mr. Pallone? Mr. Gordon? Mr. Rush? Ms. Eshoo? Ms. Eshoo votes no. Mr. Stupak? Mr. Stupak? No. Mr. Engel? No. Mr. Engel? No. Mr. Green? Ms. DeGette? Mr. Gett votes no. Mrs. Capps? Mrs. Capps votes no. Mr. Doyle? Mr. Doyle votes no. Ms. Harmon? Ms. Harmon votes no. Ms. Schakowsky? Ms. Schakowsky votes no. Mr. Gonzalez? Mr. Inslee? Mr. Inslee votes no. Ms. Baldwin? Ms. Baldwin votes no. Mr. Ross? Mr. Ross, no. Mr. Weiner? Mr. Weiner, no. Mr. Matheson? Mr. Matheson, no. Mr. Butterfield? Mr. Butterfield, no. Mr. Mellison? Mr. Mellison, no. Mr. Barrow? Mr. Barrow votes no. Mr. Hill? Mr. Hill, no. Ms. Matsui? Ms. Matsui votes no. Mrs. Christensen? Mrs. Christensen votes no. Ms. Castor? Ms. Castor, no. Mr. Sarbanes? Mr. Sarbanes, no. Mr. Murphy of Connecticut? Mr. Murphy, no. Mr. Space? Mr. Space, no. Mr. McNerney? Mr. McNerney, no. Ms. Sutton? Ms. Sutton, no. Mr. Braley? Mr. Welch? Mr. Welch, no. Mr. Barton? Mr. Barton votes aye. Mr. Hall? Mr. Hall, aye. Mr. Upton? Mr. Upton, aye. Mr. Stearns? Mr. Deal? Mr. Whitfield? Mr. Whitfield, aye. Mr. Shimkus? Mr. Shimkus, aye. Mr. Shadegg? Mr. Shadegg, aye. Mr. Blunt? Mr. Blunt votes aye. Mr. Boyer? Mr. Boyer votes aye. Mr. Radonovich? Mr. Radonovich, aye. Mr. Pitts? Mr. Pitts, aye. Ms. Bono Mack? Ms. Bono Mack, aye. Mr. Walden? Mr. Walden, aye. Mr. Terry? Mr. Rogers? Mr. Rogers, aye. Mrs. Myrick? Mr. Sullivan? Mr. Sullivan votes aye. Mr. Murphy, Pennsylvania? Mr. Murphy, Pennsylvania, aye. Mr. Burgess? Mr. Burgess, aye. Ms. Blackburn? Ms. Blackburn votes aye. Mr. Gingrey? Mr. Scalise? Mr. Scalise votes aye. Mr. Boucher? Mr. Boucher votes no. Mr. Dingle? Mr. Dingle votes no. Mr. Green? Mr. Green votes no. Mr. Rush? Mr. Rush, no. Mr. Deal? Mr. Deal votes aye. Mr. Stearns? Mr. Stearns, aye. Mr. Gingrey? Mr. Gingrey, aye.
Is Mr. Gonzalez recorded?
I'm sorry. Mr. Gonzalez? Mr. Gonzalez, no. Mr. Terry? Mr. Terry votes aye. Mr. Pallone? Mr. Pallone votes no.
Have all members responded to the call of the roll? If no member seeks recognition, the clerk will tally the vote.
On that vote, Mr. Chairman, the yeas were 22 and the nays were 34.
The ayes were
22, the noes were 34.
22 ayes, 34 noes. The amendment's not agreed to. We have some votes on the House floor. We'll recess to respond to those votes and return. Are they votes? It's not a vote? Oh, okay. The chair is mistaken. That's not a vote.